Once upon a time, in the heart of Yoruba land, there lived a powerful king renowned for his might and affluence. This king had 3 wives, each blessed with daughters, but his heart yearned for a son to carry on his legacy. Driven by this desire, he took another wife, a beautiful woman named Omolola. Fate smiled upon the king, and Omolola gave birth to twin boys, a cause for great celebration in the kingdom. However, tragedy struck when the first twin succumbed to a terrible illness, leaving only Alaba, the second twin, to inherit the throne. From a young age, Alaba exhibited traits that would shape his future. He was proud and arrogant, qualities that manifested in his treatment of others, both young and old, as mere servants to his whims. His upbringing as the sole heir to the throne only fueled his sense of entitlement and superiority. The elders of the kingdom tried to reason with Alaba, advising him to temper his pride and treat his people with respect and kindness. However, their wise counsel fell on deaf ears, as Alaba's ego had grown too large to heed their words. A young woman named Bisi from a poor Yoruba community. Her father abandoned the family, leaving her mother to provide for their large family of 10 children. Out of desperation, Bisi turned to prostitution at a very young age to earn money to support her siblings. She was willing to have sexual relations with both older and younger men in exchange for payment. The elderly women in her community looked down on her and condemned her actions, despite her difficult circumstances. Bisi has had multiple abortions, as becoming pregnant would have interfered with her ability to continue earning money through prostitution to provide for her family. Her nickname is Virgin Prostitute. This nickname seems to be a cruel mockery of her situation. In the same community where the young woman Bisi lived and worked was another woman also named Bisi Akinyemi. However, Bisi Akinyemi came from a very different background. Her father was wealthy, and her parents were overprotective of her. Bisi Akinyemi was seen as a kind, caring, and virtuous young lady. She had many suitors who wanted to marry her, but her parents were very cautious and careful about choosing the right man for their daughter, as they viewed her as their greatest treasure. Unlike the other Bisi who was disliked, this Bisi Akinyemi was loved and respected by both the old and young people in the community. In the grand palace of King Alaba, a man known for his unwavering pride and arrogance, a quest was undertaken to find a suitable queen, not just any maiden, but an upright and virtuous woman worthy of sharing his throne. The king's demands were detailed. He sought a virgin bride, untouched by the desires of mortal men. As word of the king's search spread across the land, maidens from far and wide flocked to the palace, each vying for the opportunity to become the queen. Yet King Alaba's standards were uncompromising. He subjected each prospective bride to a rigorous virginity test. To the dismay of many, the results were disheartening. Half of the maidens who had presented themselves with such confidence and poise were found to have surrendered their virtue, their innocence tarnished by the touch of another. In the grand halls of King Alaba's palace, whispers of an upright maiden named Bisi had reached the ears of the king's most trusted advisor. Intrigued by the tales of her virtue and grace, the advisor presented Bisi's name to the king, who initially harbored doubts about her purity. Nevertheless, driven by his unwavering quest for a virgin bride, King Alaba summoned his guards and commanded them to bring Bisi before him. On his journey, the messenger encountered Bisi the virgin prostitute instead of the intended Bisi Akinyemi, who came from a wealthy family. When the messenger told Bisi the prostitute that the king wanted to see her because she was a virgin, she lied and claimed she was actually Bisi Akinyemi, the wealthy virgin. Seeing this as an opportunity to change her impoverished family's circumstances, Bisi the prostitute prepared to meet the king, pretending to be the virgin Bisi Akinyemi. The king's guards then brought her from her village to the palace, as per the king's orders to bring the virgin Bisi. However, Bisi the prostitute was unaware of the serious consequences that could arise if the king discovered she was not actually a virgin when he intended to marry one. When Bisi finally stood before King Alaba, time seemed to stand still. The king's heart skipped a beat as he laid eyes upon her radiant beauty, a vision unlike any other maiden he had encountered. As their eyes met, King Alaba knew in that instant that Bisi was the one, the perfect match he had been searching for, a true embodiment of the virtues he held so dear. Bisi agreed, accepting the king's proposal to become his wife. For 3 glorious days, King Alaba hosted a grand feast, inviting all to partake in the revelry as he gave thanks to the gods for sending him his perfect match. Bisi's family was bestowed with the highest honor, granted a luxurious apartment within the palace walls. Their lives were forever changed by their daughter's union with the king. Whispers of envy and regret echoed through the streets as the parents of other maidens lamented their daughter's inability to preserve their virtue. As the grand wedding between King Alaba and Bisi, the virgin prostitute, drew near, an ancient tradition loomed over them, a tradition that would ultimately determine the fate of their union. 2 days before the nuptials, King Alaba was to consummate his marriage with Bisi, and the evidence of her virginity, in the form of a blood-stained sheet, was to be presented to the people as proof of her purity. The consequences of failing to marry a virgin bride were severe, and the kingdom held its collective breath in anticipation. Finally, the moment of truth arrived, and King Alaba emerged from his chambers, triumphantly displaying the blood-stained sheet to the eagerly awaiting crowd. A roar of jubilation erupted throughout the kingdom as the people celebrated the confirmation of Bisi's purity and the king's adherence to tradition. At around 7 p.m., a guard approached the king, informing him that a woman wished to have an audience with him. Intrigued, King Alaba ordered her to be brought before him. "If you value your life and your position as king, and if you cherish the well-being of your kingdom, you must call off this marriage and confess the truth," Chandra stated, her voice unwavering. "If not, terrible things will befall you and your people." King Alaba, taken aback by the woman's bold proclamation, found himself at a crossroads. On one hand, he had secured the virgin bride he had so desperately sought. On the other hand, Chandra's ominous warning hinted at a darker truth lurking beneath the surface. King Alaba was all excited after being with Bisi, thinking the bloodstain proved she was a virgin. His advisor was like, "Yep, that's all the proof we need, Your Majesty." But then the king got a little suspicious and sent his squad to do some digging on Bisi's background. And what did they find? This Bisi ain't the virtuous Bisi Akinyemi the king was supposed to marry. It turns out the Bisi he fell for was actually Bisi the virgin prostitute, who tried to pull a fast one to upgrade her family's broken lifestyle. When they realized she lied, the guards arrested her for trying to punk the whole kingdom. Poor Bisi pleaded, "I did it out of desperation, didn't know I could get in this much trouble." But the traditional rules were strict. The king had to marry a legit virgin. So despite catching major feelings for Bisi the ex-prostitute, King Alaba had to wife up the proper virgin Bisi Akinyemi instead. But in his heart he was still craving his jailed lover Bisi.